Every culture has its quirks, behaviors, and customs that seem perfectly reasonable to the people who grew up with them. Citizens of any country can usually explain why their traditions make sense within their cultural context. Americans, however, have taken normal to a whole different level, creating a society where things that would seem absolutely insane anywhere else are just Tuesday. 1. Americans think it's completely normal to drive everywhere, even for distances that would take less than 5 minutes to walk, treating cars as essential for trips of a few hundred feet. The concept of walking to a nearby store, restaurant, or friend's house strikes many Americans as strange or impractical. Cities and towns are designed around car travel, with many areas lacking sidewalks entirely, making walking genuinely difficult or dangerous. The idea of popping out for a quick errand on foot seems almost quaint or old-fashioned to most Americans. Europeans are consistently baffled watching Americans drive to locations visible from their starting point. The cultural expectation is that adults drive everywhere and walking is viewed as something you do for exercise rather than transportation. American suburbs often lack basic infrastructure for pedestrians, creating car dependency that seems normal to residents but bizarre to visitors. The environmental impact of this car-centric lifestyle is enormous compared to other developed nations. 2. Americans consider it normal to pay for healthcare costs that would bankrupt most families in other countries, treating medical debt as an unavoidable part of life. A simple ambulance ride can cost thousands of dollars, and people often debate whether their emergency is severe enough to justify calling one. Americans regularly start crowdfunding campaigns to pay for essential medical treatments that would be free in most developed nations. The concept of choosing between financial ruin and necessary medical care is so normalized that people share tips for avoiding ambulances. Breaking a bone or having a baby can result in bills totaling tens of thousands of dollars, even with insurance. Tourists are warned to purchase extensive travel insurance before visiting America, because a medical emergency could cost more than their house. The rest of the world watches in horror as Americans debate whether they can afford to go to the hospital. Medical bankruptcy is one of the leading causes of financial ruin in America, a concept that simply doesn't exist in countries with universal healthcare. 3. Americans think enormous food portions that could feed multiple people are standard single servings, expecting massive plates of food at every meal. Restaurant portions in America are typically 2 to 3 times larger than portions in other countries. Free refills on drinks mean many Americans consume quantities of soda that would be considered excessive elsewhere. The concept of a small drink at American fast food restaurants is often larger than a large in other countries. Tourists are consistently shocked by portion sizes and often can't finish their meals. Americans have become so accustomed to huge portions that normal-sized servings seem inadequate. The expectation of leftover food to take home is built into dining culture. Buffets offering unlimited food for a fixed price are common and popular. The obesity epidemic in America is directly linked to these normalized, gigantic portions that seem absurd to visitors from countries with more moderate serving sizes. 4. Americans consider it normal to add tax at the register rather than including it in the displayed price, requiring mental math for every purchase. The price on the shelf is never the price you actually pay, with sales tax added at checkout. Different states, counties, and cities have different tax rates, making it impossible to know exact costs. Visitors find this system needlessly complicated and deliberately misleading. Every other developed country includes tax and displayed prices, making the final cost clear. Americans defend this system by saying they want to know how much tax they're paying, though this information could easily be shown on receipts. The mental calculation required for every purchase becomes second nature to Americans but infuriates tourists. Shopping becomes a guessing game where the final price is always higher than expected. This system benefits retailers by making prices appear lower than they actually are. 5. Americans think it's normal to tip 15 to 20% on top of every service bill, with tipping expected in dozens of situations where other countries don't tip at all. Servers are paid below minimum wage with the expectation that tips will make up the difference. The burden of paying employees a living wage is shifted from employers to customers. Tourists are confused about when to tip, how much to tip, and whether tips are mandatory or optional. The list of tip-expected professions grows constantly, now including coffee shops, takeout orders, and self-checkout. Americans debate appropriate tip percentages and feel guilty for tipping too little. The rest of the world pays servers proper wages and includes service in the bill. America's tipping culture has spiraled into an elaborate system that nobody else uses. Many Americans can't imagine a world where prices include service and workers earn proper wages. 6. Americans consider it normal to use a date format that confuses the entire rest of the world, writing month, day, year instead of the logical day, month, year. Reading dates becomes a puzzle for international visitors trying to determine whether 3/4/2023 means March 4th or April 3rd. The American system defies the logical progression from smallest to largest unit or largest to smallest. Americans insist their system makes sense despite being the only country using it. Official documents require specification of date format to avoid confusion. The problem becomes critical in international business where date confusion causes genuine problems. Computer systems struggle with American date formats conflicting with international standards. Americans don't understand why the rest of the world finds their date system confusing. The month-first format serves no logical purpose except tradition. 7. Americans think it's normal to measure everything in feet, pounds, and Fahrenheit, despite the entire world using the metric system. Temperature discussions with foreigners require conversion apps. Americans measure driving distances in time rather than kilometers or miles. The refusal to adopt metric causes problems in science, medicine, and international trade. Americans defend their measurement systems despite them being mathematically more complicated. Students learn both systems, but daily life uses exclusively imperial measurements. The rest of the world abandoned these systems decades ago. American stubbornness about measurement units causes real problems in global cooperation. Simple conversations about weather or distance require translation. 8. Americans consider it normal to work while sick, going to jobs with contagious illnesses because they lack paid sick leave. Many jobs offer 0 paid sick days, forcing sick employees to choose between income and recovery. The culture valorizes working through illness as dedication, rather than recognizing it spreads disease. Americans brag about never taking sick days as proof of work ethic. Workplaces become illness incubators as sick employees infect everyone. Other countries mandate paid sick leave and expect sick workers to stay home. American attitudes towards sick leave shock Europeans who have weeks of mandated sick time. The lack of sick leave particularly affects service workers who handle food while ill. This normalized behavior contributes to workplace disease transmission. 9. Americans think enormous pickup trucks and SUVs are normal family vehicles, driving vehicles designed for commercial work as daily transportation. Parking lots are dominated by trucks that would be considered commercial vehicles elsewhere. The average American vehicle is significantly larger than vehicles in other countries. These massive vehicles consume more fuel and create more pollution. Parking spaces struggle to accommodate oversized vehicles. Americans view large vehicles as status symbols and necessary, despite rarely using their cargo capacity. The trend toward bigger vehicles makes roads more dangerous for smaller cars and pedestrians. Other countries are baffled by Americans driving vehicles designed for construction to pick up groceries. The cultural obsession with vehicle size seems bizarre to visitors. 10. Americans consider it normal to have gaps in public bathroom stalls so large that eye contact is possible, offering virtually no privacy. The spaces between doors and walls are often over an inch wide. People can see in from multiple angles, making bathroom use uncomfortable. Americans have normalized this lack of privacy to the point of not questioning it. Visitors are horrified by bathroom stalls that offer less privacy than their home country's dressing rooms. The justification involves cleaning and preventing drug use, though other countries manage without privacy violations. Americans don't realize how unusually exposed their bathroom stalls are until traveling abroad. The gap at the bottom is often large enough to crawl under. This architectural choice is uniquely American and universally hated by visitors. 11. Americans think it's normal to require driver's licenses as primary identification, despite not everyone driving. The expectation that adults have driver's licenses creates problems for non-drivers. State ID cards exist but are viewed as lesser forms of identification. Cities with good public transportation still assume everyone drives. The cultural expectation of car ownership is so strong that adults without licenses face questions. Getting a driver's license is a rite of passage, even in dense cities where cars aren't necessary. Other countries use national ID cards or passports as primary identification. The assumption that everyone drives reflects America's car-centric culture. Non-drivers are viewed as unusual, rather than as people making reasonable transportation choices. 12. Americans consider it normal to pledge allegiance to the flag in schools, having children recite patriotic oaths before understanding their meaning. Daily flag pledges are standard in elementary schools across America. The practice of mandatory patriotic displays strikes other democracies as authoritarian. Americans defend the pledge as tradition without recognizing how unusual it is. Other countries teach patriotism through history rather than required daily oaths. The phrase "under God" was added during the Cold War but is now defended as original. Visitors find the practice of children reciting pledges cultish and strange. The normalization of mandatory patriotic displays in schools is uniquely American. Other democracies question the need for compulsory displays of nationalism from children. 13. Americans think it's normal to discuss salaries in terms of annual pay, rather than hourly, monthly, or weekly rates used elsewhere. Job listings show yearly salaries even for hourly positions. The annual framing makes it harder to calculate actual hourly earnings. Americans think in terms of yearly income when other countries focus on monthly take-home pay. Discussing salaries requires conversion to understand actual purchasing power. The system obscures hourly value of work. Visitors find annual salary discussions confusing for budgeting purposes. Monthly expenses don't align neatly with annual pay. The American system makes international salary comparisons difficult. Other countries structure financial planning around monthly income. 14. Americans consider it normal to have washing machines and dryers in their homes rather than shared laundry facilities. The expectation of personal laundry equipment in every residence seems extravagant to many cultures. Apartments without in-unit laundry are considered less desirable. The space and expense of personal laundry equipment is considered worthwhile. Other countries commonly use shared laundry rooms or facilities. The American expectation of personal appliances extends beyond laundry to many household items. The concept of not owning a dryer seems primitive to many Americans. Energy consumption from personal laundry equipment is significantly higher than shared facilities. The normalization of individual appliances reflects American values of privacy and personal space. 15. Americans think it's normal to eat dinner at 6 p.m. or earlier, while most of the world eats significantly later. Restaurants are busy during early evening hours that Europeans would consider late afternoon. The American dinner schedule seems rushed to cultures where dinner is a late evening event. Spanish or Italian dinner times would seem impossibly late to Americans. Early eating schedules reflect different cultural approaches to work-life balance. Americans often eat dinner before or immediately after work. The concept of dinner as a late, leisurely meal seems impractical to American schedules. Other cultures are surprised by Americans eating dinner during what they consider afternoon. Different dinner times reflect broader cultural differences in daily rhythms and priorities. 16. Americans consider it normal to have garbage disposals in kitchen sinks, grinding food waste rather than composting or disposing of it separately. The mechanical grinding of food waste seems bizarre and unnecessary to other countries. Most of the world doesn't dispose of food through plumbing systems. The American convenience of garbage disposals creates plumbing and environmental issues. Other countries manage food waste through composting or garbage. Americans are shocked visiting places without garbage disposals. The normalization of grinding food waste reflects American convenience culture. The environmental impact of sending food through water systems seems wasteful to other nations. Many countries have more sustainable approaches to food waste management. 17. Americans think it's normal to have massive refrigerators that could store food for weeks or months. American refrigerators are significantly larger than those in other countries. The expectation of buying groceries weekly or monthly rather than daily seems normal. Other cultures shop more frequently for fresh food rather than storing everything. The American preference for bulk buying and storage reflects different shopping patterns. European kitchens often can't accommodate American-sized refrigerators. The cultural difference reflects different approaches to food freshness and shopping frequency. Americans traveling abroad are surprised by smaller refrigerators elsewhere. The size difference reflects broader cultural differences in food culture and shopping habits. 18. Americans consider it normal to have air conditioning running constantly in summer, keeping buildings freezing cold. The extreme air conditioning in American buildings shocks visitors from temperate climates. Americans wear sweaters indoors during summer because air conditioning is so aggressive. The energy consumption from constant cooling is enormous. Other countries use air conditioning more sparingly. Americans feel uncomfortable without air conditioning at temperatures other cultures find pleasant. The cultural expectation of frigid indoor temperatures year-round seems wasteful. Visitors need to bring warm layers for summer indoor spaces. The normalization of extreme temperature control reflects American energy abundance. 19. Americans think it's normal to have college students living in dormitories, while many countries have students living at home or in independent apartments. The American residential college experience with mandatory dorm living seems infantilizing to some cultures. The expense of room and board is added to already high tuition. Other countries expect college students to find their own housing. The American system of supervised student housing extends adolescence. Residential colleges with meal plans are uniquely American. The cultural expectation of leaving home for college regardless of local university options seems wasteful. Many cultures find the dorm system odd and expensive. The residential college model reflects American approaches to independence and education. 20. Americans consider it normal to smile at strangers and make small talk, behaving in ways other cultures find overly familiar or fake. The American friendliness seems insincere to many cultures. Smiling at everyone is considered polite in America, but weird elsewhere. Small talk with strangers is expected in America, but intrusive in other places. Americans traveling abroad are confused when their friendliness isn't reciprocated. The cultural difference in stranger interactions causes misunderstandings. What Americans see as polite, others see as superficial. Store employees are expected to be enthusiastically friendly. The American service smile strikes many cultures as fake. Different cultures have different boundaries for appropriate stranger interaction. 21. Americans think it's normal to drink iced beverages year-round, including iced coffee in winter. The preference for ice in everything confuses cultures that drink room temperature water. Americans request ice in drinks that other countries serve without it. The obsession with ice-cold beverages seems bizarre to many cultures. Restaurants automatically fill drinks with ice, leaving little room for actual beverage. Other countries often don't provide ice unless specifically requested. Americans traveling abroad complain about lack of ice in drinks. The cultural preference for extremely cold beverages is distinctly American. European visitors are surprised by the amount of ice in American drinks. 22. Americans consider it normal to have shoes on indoors, wearing outdoor footwear throughout their homes. Many cultures remove shoes at the door to keep homes clean. Americans often keep shoes on even in bedrooms. The practice of indoor shoes seems unhygienic to shoe-removing cultures. Americans don't understand the logic of removing shoes indoors. The cultural difference causes awkward moments when Americans visit shoe-free homes. Indoor shoe wearing tracks outdoor dirt throughout homes. Many Asian and Scandinavian cultures are confused by American shoe habits. The normalization of shoes indoors reflects different cleanliness standards. 23. Americans think it's normal to have huge houses with rooms that aren't regularly used. The American preference for maximum square footage exceeds other countries. Houses have formal dining rooms used once a year. Guest rooms sit empty most of the time. The cultural expectation of bigger homes regardless of needs seems wasteful. Other countries build for actual needs rather than maximum size. Americans traveling abroad find homes uncomfortably small. The space expectations are significantly higher than other developed nations. The preference for large houses reflects American values and land availability. 24. Americans consider it normal to use red cups for parties, specifically solo brand cups that have become cultural icons. The red cup as symbol of American parties is recognized worldwide. Other countries don't have specific disposable cup cultures. The red cup appears in countless movies and TV shows as party shorthand. International visitors recognize red cups from American media. The disposable cup culture seems wasteful to other nations. Americans don't realize how culturally specific red cups are. The plastic cup has become accidentally iconic. The normalization of specific party supplies is uniquely American. 25. Americans think it's normal to have dishwashers in most kitchens rather than washing dishes by hand. The expectation of mechanical dishwashing is not universal. Other countries commonly wash dishes by hand. Americans consider dishwashers essential appliances. The energy and water use of personal dishwashers is significant. Many cultures don't prioritize dishwashing automation. Americans traveling abroad are surprised by lack of dishwashers. The appliance expectations differ significantly by country. The normalization of dishwashers reflects American labor-saving preferences. 26. Americans consider it normal to have free public restrooms available everywhere, expecting bathroom access without purchasing anything. The American expectation of free toilets surprises visitors from countries where bathrooms require payment. The cultural outrage when bathrooms aren't free is uniquely American. Other countries accept paying small fees for restroom maintenance. Americans view bathroom access as a fundamental right. The expectation of free facilities everywhere reflects different public infrastructure approaches. European-paid toilets shock Americans traveling abroad. The bathroom access expectations differ globally. American entitlement to free restrooms isn't universal. 27. Americans think it's normal to call their sports championships World Series, despite only American teams competing. The naming convention suggests global participation that doesn't exist. Other countries find the World Champion title presumptuous. Americans defend the naming through various historical justifications. The cultural assumption that American competitions are world events seems arrogant. Baseball's World Series excludes most of the world. American sports provincialism is reflected in championship naming. International observers mock the World Series that isn't worldwide. The normalization of world titles for national competitions is American exceptionalism. 28. Americans consider it normal to have pharmacies with massive aisles of over-the-counter medications, offering drugstore options that would require prescriptions elsewhere. The American pharmaceutical availability seems dangerous to countries with stricter medication regulations. Antibiotics require prescriptions in America, but advertising them is common. The cultural acceptance of self-medication is higher than other countries. Drug commercials listing side effects dominate American television. Other countries restrict pharmaceutical advertising. Americans expect easy access to medications. The normalization of drug advertising and availability differs globally. Other countries regulate pharmaceuticals more strictly. 29. Americans think it's normal to have peanut butter as a staple food item, eating it regularly while other countries view it as unusual. The American peanut butter obsession confuses much of the world. Peanut butter is absent from many international cuisines. Americans abroad are shocked that peanut butter is expensive or unavailable. The cultural assumption that everyone eats peanut butter is wrong. Other countries have different protein spreads. The American staple is exotic elsewhere. Peanut butter's ubiquity in America isn't matched globally. The normalization of peanut butter reflects American food culture specifics. 30. Americans consider it normal to have clothes dryers rather than air-drying laundry, using mechanical drying for all clothes. The energy consumption of clothes dryers is enormous compared to air drying. Other countries commonly hang laundry to dry naturally. Americans view air drying as inconvenient or lower class. The cultural preference for mechanical drying reflects energy abundance. Dryers are standard in American homes. Other countries find the American dryer dependency wasteful. The environmental impact of universal machine drying is significant. The normalization of dryers reflects American convenience priorities. 31. Americans think it's normal to abbreviate everything, creating acronyms and abbreviations that confuse non-Americans. The cultural tendency toward abbreviation extends to all areas of life. Americans use shortened versions of words as default. Other countries keep words complete. The assumption that abbreviations are universally understood is wrong. American abbreviations make conversation difficult for ESL speakers. The casual shortening of language is distinctly American. Other English speakers find American abbreviations excessive. The normalization of constant abbreviation reflects American linguistic evolution. 32. Americans consider it normal to sue each other frequently, having litigation rates far exceeding other countries. The American legal culture encourages lawsuits for minor issues. Other countries resolve disputes without constant litigation. Americans threaten lawsuits casually. The cultural acceptance of litigation seems excessive to other nations. Lawyer advertising is common in America, but shocking elsewhere. The normalization of lawsuits reflects American legal culture. Other countries find American litigiousness bizarre. The lawsuit culture is uniquely American in scale. 33. Americans think it's normal to have sweet bread, with sandwich bread tasting like dessert to many foreign palates. American bread contains sugar levels that would classify it as cake elsewhere. The sweetness of standard white bread shocks visitors. Other countries make savory bread. Americans don't notice the sweetness. The cultural preference for sweet bread reflects American taste preferences. Visitors complain American bread tastes wrong. The sugar content in standard bread is uniquely high. The normalization of sweet bread is distinctly American. 34. Americans consider it normal to have their toilets filled with water to the brim, having different toilet designs than most of the world. The American toilet with high water levels confuses visitors. Other countries use different flushing mechanisms with less water. The risk of overflow seems high with American toilets. The cultural difference in toilet design is significant. Americans traveling abroad find low-water toilets confusing. The toilet design differences reflect different plumbing approaches. The American system uses more water. The normalization of high-water toilets is specific to America. 35. Americans think it's normal to buy groceries for a week or month at a time, doing massive shopping trips rather than frequent small trips. The cultural preference for bulk shopping reflects American shopping patterns. Other countries shop more frequently for fresh food. Americans fill enormous shopping carts. The frequency difference reflects different approaches to fresh food. Other cultures prioritize daily fresh purchases. Americans view frequent shopping as inconvenient. The bulk shopping culture is distinctly American. Shopping pattern differences reflect broader cultural priorities. 36. Americans consider it normal to have Greek life in universities, with fraternities and sororities that seem bizarre to other countries. The American Greek system confuses international students. Other countries don't have equivalent social organizations. The hazing, exclusivity, and expense seem wrong to other cultures. Americans defend Greek life despite its problems. The cultural institution of fraternities and sororities is uniquely American. International students find the Greek system weird and cult-like. The normalization of Greek life reflects American university culture. Other countries organize student life differently. 37. Americans think it's normal to celebrate Halloween extensively, treating it as a major holiday while other countries barely acknowledge it. The American Halloween celebration far exceeds other countries. The candy expectations, decorations, and cultural importance seem excessive. Other countries have their own traditions rather than Halloween. Americans expect elaborate Halloween participation. The commercial Halloween industry is predominantly American. Other countries find American Halloween intensity surprising. The normalization of major Halloween celebration is distinctly American. The holiday importance reflects American commercial culture. 38. Americans consider it normal to work through lunch, eating at their desks rather than taking proper breaks. The American tendency to work through lunch seems unhealthy to cultures with mandatory breaks. Other countries protect lunch breaks legally. Americans brag about skipping lunch as productivity. The cultural devaluation of meal breaks concerns other nations. Proper lunch hours are standard elsewhere. The American lunch habits reflect broader work culture problems. Working through meals is normalized in America. Other countries mandate proper break times. 39. Americans think it's normal to have warning labels on everything, including obvious dangers like hot coffee is hot. The American obsession with warning labels reflects litigation culture. Other countries assume common sense. The label proliferation seems absurd to visitors. Americans expect warnings for everything. The cultural requirement for obvious warnings results from lawsuits. Other countries don't label obvious dangers. The normalization of excessive warnings is American lawsuit prevention. The warning culture seems ridiculous internationally. 40. Americans consider it normal to call the main course the entrée, using the French word incorrectly. The American menu terminology confuses French speakers. In French, entrée means starter. Americans adopted the word with different meaning. The cultural misappropriation of French terminology is uniquely American. Other English-speaking countries use correct French terms. The normalization of incorrect entrée usage shows American linguistic independence. French visitors are confused by American menus. The term usage reflects American adaptation of foreign words. 41. Americans think it's normal to have spray cheese in a can, treating processed cheese product as acceptable food. The American cheese culture shocks other countries. Spray cheese seems like a joke product to visitors. Other countries question why cheese needs to be in aerosol form. Americans see nothing wrong with spray cheese. The cultural acceptance of extreme food processing is American. Other countries prioritize real cheese. The normalization of spray cheese reflects American convenience food culture. International visitors view spray cheese as evidence of American food problems. 42. Americans consider it normal to eat food while walking or driving, having meals on the go constantly. The American tendency to eat while mobile seems uncivilized to sit-down cultures. Other countries expect meals at tables. Americans consume breakfast, lunch, and dinner in cars. The cultural acceptance of mobile eating reflects American pace. Other societies prioritize mealtime as social events. The normalization of eating while doing other activities is American. Food as fuel rather than experience reflects cultural values. Other countries find American eating habits disrespectful to food. 43. Americans think it's normal to have enormous Christmas light displays, covering houses in thousands of lights. The American Christmas light culture exceeds other countries. The energy consumption of light displays is massive. Other countries decorate more modestly. Americans compete for most elaborate displays. The cultural expectation of extreme Christmas decoration is distinctly American. The competitive light displays seem excessive internationally. The normalization of house covering lights reflects American holiday culture. Other countries question the energy waste of elaborate displays. 44. Americans consider it normal to call football soccer, while the rest of the world calls it football, insisting on their terminology despite global disagreement. The American insistence on soccer terminology annoys the world. Football is called football everywhere except America. Americans defend soccer naming through historical reasons. The cultural stubbornness about terminology seems arbitrary. Other countries united on football terminology. Americans refuse to adapt to global naming. The normalization of calling football soccer is American exceptionalism. The rest of the world finds American soccer insistence frustrating. 45, and finally, Americans think it's normal to have college cost $250,000, treating educational bankruptcy as acceptable. The American student debt crisis shocks other developed nations where education is free or affordable. Students graduate with mortgage-sized debt before starting careers. The normalization of life-altering educational debt seems dystopian to other countries. Americans defend the system while drowning in student loans. The cultural acceptance of paying hundreds of thousands for education bewilders nations with free universities. The student debt burden is uniquely American in scale. Other countries provide education without destroying financial futures. Americans have normalized an educational system that creates generational poverty, treating catastrophic debt as a necessary part of adulthood, while the rest of the world provides education as a public good, proving that sometimes what Americans think is normal is actually a crisis that other nations solved decades ago. What makes these American habits particularly interesting isn't just that they're different. Every culture has unique customs. It's that Americans genuinely don't realize how unusual these behaviors are until they travel abroad or interact with international visitors who are shocked by everyday American life. The surprising part is how defensive Americans become when these norms are questioned, insisting their way is normal despite overwhelming global evidence to the contrary. Cultural norms feel inevitable when you grow up with them, making it hard to see them as choices rather than universal truths. Subscribe if you enjoyed this cultural reality check, and remember that normal is always relative to where you're standing.